ICC has asked me to make a presentation setting out the main principles of Ukrainian law as they apply to contracts and foreign investments. Obviously, with less than 15 minutes, we cannot hope to cover all the relevant legal details that may arise. However, I will try to explain the main concepts and issues that you face when operating in Ukraine, especially when you are participating in the Rebuild Ukraine program. Let's have a look at the list of topics that I have prepared for you. As you can see, there are a lot of points to cover in the short time available. We have less than a minute per slide, but at the end of the presentation, you should feel that the legal system in Ukraine and that it is business-friendly towards foreign participation in the economy. However, like any business environment, I would urge you to take professional advice to avoid unpleasant surprises. If you need such advice, I provide my contact details at the end of the presentation, and you can always reach me through ICC Ukraine. Okay, let's begin. I thought a good starting point would be to explain the foundation of the modern Ukrainian legal system. Until 1991, Ukraine's legal system was part of the Soviet law system, the socialist model. After Ukraine gained independence, it transitioned to continental law, including the necessary elements of a market economy and democratic principles. The Ukrainian legal system is now based on the principles of continental Romano-Germanic law. The basic principle of the Ukrainian legal system is the rule of law. The law is superior to any actions of public authorities or officials. Ratified international treaties, for example, the European Convention on Human Rights, take precedence over national laws but are inferior to the Constitution. The judiciary is a key independent element of the legal system that ensures the protection of rights and the rule of law. The legal system is still developing, especially in relation to European integration, the harmonization of legislation with EU norms. Digitalization. This includes digital transactions and the implementation of e-justice to facilitate access to law. The anti-corruption framework forms a separate legal framework. This anti-corruption drive was one of the key drivers behind the development of Prozoro, the Ukrainian public procurement platform. Of course, martial law has to be considered. Temporary laws and decrees, for example, on mobilization and nationalization, take precedence in the security sector. These are key pillars of modern, commercial Ukrainian law. I'll now discuss some of the key considerations affecting the Ukrainian law of contract. The Civil Code of Ukraine of 2004 regulates the contract law of Ukraine. This includes terms related to the conclusion, execution, amendment, and termination of a contract. It is based on the principles of freedom of contract, good faith, and proper performance of obligations. Ukraine also has the Law of Ukraine on International Treaties of Ukraine, which regulates the conclusion of contracts with foreign entities if they have the status of international treaties. Contracts and other documents may be bilingual. However, it is worth noting that Ukrainian is the official language in Ukraine. Therefore, all official documents are drawn up in Ukrainian. Our company has more than 20 years of experience in legal support of business, drafting contracts and international agreements. For the convenience and full understanding of foreign companies' activities in Ukraine, we translate all documents and certify the translations. If the law requires an apostille, we obtain an apostille for documents for our clients from the Ministry of Justice of Ukraine. It is important to note that contracts in Ukraine are drafted in accordance with Ukrainian law. Therefore, in this case, it is important to have a professional Ukrainian legal advisor before signing agreements or other documents. Electronic signatures of contracts and electronic invoices in Ukraine are important elements of modern document management, which are regulated by law and are actively used in business, public administration, and everyday life. The digitization of trade documents in Ukraine is the process of converting paper documents related to trade activities, contracts, invoices, waybills, etc. into electronic format to ensure their legal validity. Ukraine has adopted and enacted laws that provide for the entire process, which is part of the broader digitalization of the economy and document management that is being actively promoted in Ukraine, especially during martial law. Tax returns are also submitted in electronic format. Once you have a contract, you should know how they can be enforced. On the next slide, I list the main protections you have under contract law in Ukraine. As you can see, there are several mechanisms that you can use to enforce your contracts and to ensure the performance of your contracts. However, what may be particularly relevant at the moment is that the concept of force majeure is recognized under Ukrainian law. Ukraine is particularly keen to favor inward investment and therefore has legislated for a number of protections for foreign investors. We'll have a quick look at these on the next slide. Legal protection of foreign investment in Ukraine combines national guarantees with international mechanisms. Special guarantees aimed at creating a favorable investment climate are approved by law. As of 2025, in the context of martial law and post-war reconstruction, these mechanisms listed here are of particular importance. Next, looking at risk mitigation and protection, one issue frequently raised with us by our foreign clients is that of intellectual property rights in Ukraine. I will set out the situation regarding intellectual property rights on the next slide. The protection of intellectual property rights in Ukraine is governed by the latest national legislation and international treaties. Therefore, you can expect complete protection, provided you have the necessary documentation in place. If you need any help, you know where to find me. If you are unfortunate enough to have a serious contractual dispute, there are clear procedures to follow, as I set out on the next slide. Dispute resolution in Ukrainian courts is straightforward with clear procedures. An alternative is to go to independent arbitration, such as is offered by the ICC. This option is usually quicker and cheaper than the more formal procedures. However, unless both parties are agreeable, this cannot be imposed by one party on the other, unless it is already stipulated in the relevant contract. Anyway, let's think about more positive things. You see the potential for your business in Ukraine, and you need to set up a local office. Let's see what your main options are on the next slide. You may be considering the establishment of a Ukrainian presence. There are two main options open to you: the establishment of a subsidiary or a representative office. In Ukraine, foreigners can easily establish private companies. The basic requirements for setting up a company are not onerous. There can be one or more founders. The founders may be both individuals and legal entities from abroad. There are no minimum requirements for the amount of the company's share capital. The head of the company is an individual who can be one of the founders or a representative of the founding company or a local director. There are no requirements for the number of employees. Some types of activities require additional state licenses. Alternatively, you may just need a representative office. If you think you may need a physical presence in Ukraine, I would be happy to discuss your requirements and advise you which would be the optimum structure to satisfy your requirements. Of course, if you make an investment in Ukraine, it would be natural to look to base personnel here. The next slide deals with that possibility. Foreign nationals have the right to work in Ukraine. They can be a director of a company or the head of a non-governmental organization or charity. For this purpose, the state grants the appropriate work permit for foreigners. Okay. At some stage, if you want to be active in the Ukrainian market, you will have to open a bank account, take out insurance policies, and take into account any exchange control regulations that may affect your business. Let's look at these on the next slide. With regard to banking and insurance services, there's no need to be concerned. You can find a full range of services to cover all your needs in the Ukraine. With regard to currency controls, harmonization with EU directives on currency resulted in increased market liberalization. However, exchange controls were tightened significantly with the Russian invasion. These strict exchange controls have now been relaxed. For example, currently, it is allowed to pay dividends abroad up to EUR 1 million per month. Also, any foreign payments to cover imports supporting the Rebuild Ukraine program can be freely made. There are, however, still features of foreign exchange control that you may have to take into account. For example, the bans on speculative transactions and capital outflows remain in place. Now, on to everyone's least favorite topic, tax. But there are some pleasant surprises here in Ukraine. As you can see, compared to many Western countries, Ukrainian tax rates are relatively low. There are also many tax breaks, reductions, and exemptions. To fully understand your particular tax regime, it would be necessary to discuss your tax situation with a tax consultant. Talking about possible tax breaks, and given the audience's interest in the Rebuild Ukraine program and the presence of industrial parks in the Rebuild Ukraine program, I thought I would add an extra slide on the tax breaks available for industrial parks. An industrial park is a designated territory within which the participants of an industrial park may carry out economic activities in the field of processing industry, processing of industrial and/or household waste, alternative energy, energy storage, as well as scientific and technical activities in the field of information and electronic communications. The main tax benefits are those listed here, which are considerable. However, conditions will apply. Should you be interested in these opportunities, we'd be very happy to discuss them with you in more detail. Talking about the Rebuild Ukraine program, I know that you have had a presentation on how to make a bid, but I would like to take this opportunity to add a few recommendations based on my own experience. Here they are, my tips for success. The most important of these relate to preparing carefully in advance and make sure that your offer meets all of the tender requirements. Good luck with these. Here is a summary of the main points I have covered. Ukrainian law is now based on Romano-Germanic law and is increasingly harmonized with EU law and developments supporting the digitalization of trade. There are little to no barriers to foreign investment. The tax regime is favorable when compared to many other countries. The most important emphasis is on legality and the transparency of doing business. Well, that's it. We've covered a significant series of issues, and I hope not too superficially. This just leaves me with the task of drawing a conclusion and giving you my contact details. The conclusion I would take is simple. Ukraine has created favorable conditions for foreign companies to conduct business in Ukraine and especially to participate in the Rebuild Ukraine program. If you have additional questions, you can call or write to me. I look forward to hearing from you.